Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast on Telework and Dependent Care Guidance. My name is Veronica Givens, and I work for OPM's Office of Work-Life, Leadership, and Executive Development. As some of you all know, in December 2016, OPM issued new guidance on dependent care. Some of the impetus behind the new guidance was recognition that the changing needs of the workforce require periodic reevaluation and reassessment of existing programs to ensure that the federal government can effectively compete with other sectors for talent. Workplace flexibilities like telework are increasingly the key to attracting and retaining the best talent for achieving agency missions. In recent years, much attention has focused on available leave programs and other workplace flexibilities to serve a contemporary workforce that often must grapple with dual and sometimes competing pressures to meet work and personal responsibilities. This guidance was developed with the purpose of providing agencies with additional tools to help employees resolve conflicts that might arise when work and family responsibilities collide, while also focusing attention on the importance of being responsive to mission and operational requirements. So our agenda for today is that we'll discuss the issue of telework and dependent care from a historical perspective. We'll also look at a case study conducted by the General Services Administration, make the case for telework and dependent care, look at some key challenges, as well as look at some key highlights from OPM's guidance that was issued in December. We'll introduce a few scenarios, provide frequently asked questions, and end with some key takeaways. Since the inception of telework, an enduring policy mantra has been in place that telework is not a substitute for dependent care. Although federal telework programs have been in operation for decades, the concept of using telework programs to assist with dependent care issues has been a very sensitive, if not controversial, idea. While many organizations and managers embrace the broad concept of using telework to help employees balance work and other personal responsibilities, that generally has not translated to include dependent care issues. The reasoning for this exclusion is the fear or concern that teleworkers will spend official work hours taking care of dependents. The presumption is that blending dependent care and telework will result in reduced quality of work. In response to this concern, many organizations have established aggressive policy constraints regarding telework and dependents. As part of its efforts to advance federal telework to achieve progress in resolving the telework dependent care issue, GSA conducted two studies in 2003 and 2005 to examine the question of whether telework could assist with dependent care without diminishing job performance. The 2005 study specifically focused on federal home-based teleworkers. The overall objective of the study was to establish empirically based findings regarding the relationship between telework and dependent care, as well as to establish a basis for recommending improvements in existing telework programs. For those who might be interested in reviewing the report, I have included a link at the end of the presentation. I won't focus on the entire report, but will highlight some of the key findings and recommendations because this study did serve as a foundational piece for the development of OPM's guidance. It comes as no surprise that 91% of the respondents noted that telework helps with dependent care responsibilities by providing employees with greater flexibility, assisting with emergencies, allowing more flexibility to transport dependents to appointments, and also by providing greater coordination of care. Another key finding as it relates to telework's impact on employees with caregiving responsibilities is that 88% reported less stress, 77% reported more energy, and 97% indicated that telework allowed them to better meet their job and dependent care responsibilities. The majority, 60%, reported that telework impacted job performance, but most reported a positive impact, including improved job performance, improved morale, and reduced stress. When asked to report their perceptions of benefits to their organizations, respondents noted positive impacts in the following areas: increased retention, less use of leave, improved job performance, and improved morale. Also, on the question of whether changes could be made to enable telework to better assist dependent care situations, respondents noted that changes in existing telework policies would be helpful, including increased organizational and management support and telework combined with the use of more flexible schedules. In making the business case for the positive relationship that can exist between telework and dependent care, it's clear to see how employees can use telework to care for a wide variety of dependents, including children, adult dependents with disabilities or serious health concerns, and elder care. In many cases, these employees serve in the role as primary caretaker, which can add additional pressures as it relates to balancing work and dependent care responsibilities. In appropriate circumstances, telework can help employees better balance their caregiving responsibilities with their job duties. In making the business case for organizations, we see that telework, used appropriately, can also have a positive impact on agencies, specifically in the area of retention and attraction of talent. In addition to the retention tool, using telework and other workplace flexibilities can also have a positive impact in the areas of increased job performance, increased morale, reduced usage of leave, and more job satisfaction. As a result of this study, GSA was able to compile a list of key recommendations, which included the need to clarify the appropriate role that telework can play in balancing work and dependent care, as well as the need for top-down management support to dispel the anxiety and sensitivity associated with the proper use of telework as a dependent care solution. There was also recognition for the need for top-down support to help managers and policymakers accept and promote the work-life balance potential of telework, particularly as it relates to work and dependent care, as well as the need to promote the benefits to agencies for allowing the appropriate use of telework in dependent care. Finally, recognition for the need for telework policies that specifically address the use and usefulness of telework in assisting with dependent care solutions. It's important to remember that much of this work and focus took place prior to the enactment of the Telework Enhancement Act. So the key challenges. Fast forward 4 years to the passage of the Telework Enhancement Act, and we find that not much has changed. Restrictive program policies and management resistance remain key barriers to broad telework adoption, even though federal agencies face increasing pressures to expand their telework programs, especially in the area of emergency planning. One of the most enduring barriers is that manager perceptions around the appropriate use of telework and dependent care often create an atmosphere of suspicion and sensitivity in which the balanced use of telework is overshadowed, precluded, or significantly inhibited. So that takes us to OPM's role. Based on OPM's leadership role for advancing and supporting federal telework, we began to focus on gaps in existing policy areas that needed to be addressed across the government. That effort started by examining recurring questions and concerns raised by agencies, managers, and employees. And what we found was that some of the recurring themes revolved around questions about telework during OPM operating status announcements for weather-related emergencies, telework to support employees who experience unplanned but temporary family emergencies or challenges, telework following childbirth and the transition back to work, telework involving adult dependents, especially if the employee needs to temporarily relocate to a different geographic location, and telework to support nursing moms. Obviously, this list is not all exhaustive. So in December, we released new guidance to address some of these policy concerns in an effort to provide agencies and managers with additional tools to make more informed decisions. The key objectives of the guidance include providing agencies with the appropriate tools to serve a contemporary workforce in a manner that meets the needs of employees while being responsive to agency mission requirements. The guidance also sought to clarify the appropriate role that telework can play in balancing work and dependent care responsibilities. Our policy objectives. We also wanted to highlight to agencies and federal employees who have caregiving responsibilities, highlight some of the benefits. So often the debate around the relationship between telework and dependent care focuses exclusively on the benefits to employees without highlighting the benefits to agencies. So we thought it was important to highlight some of those benefits, which we've already mentioned, which include improved recruitment and retention, improved employee job performance, employee morale, job satisfaction, and employee engagement. Finally, we wanted to provide guidance to help agencies and employees address the appropriate use and usefulness of telework in assisting with dependent care responsibilities. Important points. The guidance clarifies but does not eliminate the requirement that telework may not be used as a substitute for dependent care. The guidance also focuses attention on the fact that telework is official work time and a tool for accomplishing work and agency mission requirements. Also, the guidance does not create any new employee entitlements or benefits. It's also important to point out that while the guidance focuses on the appropriate use of telework to assist employees with caregiving responsibilities, we are not suggesting that telework is the only option available to agencies, managers, or employees. Agencies continue to have the discretion to use other workplace flexibilities, including leave and flexible work schedules, to address employee needs, or to use telework in conjunction with other workplace flexibilities to help employees balance their work and family responsibilities. Good performance management and strong communication skills are necessary to assist managers in making decisions about the appropriate use and usefulness of telework to assist employees with dependent care situations. Employees are reminded that workplace policies, including time and attendance requirements, remain in effect while the employee is teleworking. In this section, we're going to take each of those concepts we just mentioned and break them down further. The first is, telework is not a substitute for dependent care. The guidance makes clear that the focus must remain first and foremost on the work. It does not change the basic premise that telework is primarily an arrangement established to facilitate the accomplishment of work. For those reasons, an employee may not use telework with the intent and for the sole purpose of meeting his or her dependent care responsibilities during the performance of official duties. Employees are expected to arrange for dependent care just as they would if they were working in the office. This is true even for employees who use a home-based dependent care arrangement. On the days that they telework, they are still required to have in-home dependent care available. Secondly, the guidance recognizes that while telework is not a substitute for dependent care, it can be a valuable flexibility to employees with caregiving responsibilities in certain unplanned and temporary circumstances. In these short-term temporary circumstances, there can be a dual benefit for both the agency and the employee. Provided the employee has a telework agreement in place and is telework ready, the agency or manager can exercise discretion in determining whether an employee can accomplish at least some part of his or her duties while teleworking. Telework is official work time. Each teleworker is responsible and accountable for his or her performance and conduct, being available and responsive to the demands of his or her organization and coworkers, completing work assignments on time, keeping supervisors and coworkers informed, and maintaining open lines of communication. Telework is not an employee entitlement or benefit. Agency telework policy should focus on the work while striking the right balance between the employee's caregiving responsibilities. Consider telework used in conjunction with other flexibilities. As mentioned previously, agencies retain the discretion to opt to use other available leave programs as opposed to telework, or an agency can use telework in tandem with existing leave programs and other flexibilities to assist employees in meeting their caregiving responsibilities. To successfully balance work and dependent care responsibilities, communication is key. And also, it's important to apply the rules equitably and consistently. It's also important to engage employees in a dialogue to ensure a complete and accurate understanding of the request to use telework to assist with a dependent care situation. Understand that each request will be unique to the employee and his or her specific circumstances. Decisions should be made on a case-by-case basis, taking into account the unique circumstances. Avoid a one-size-fits-all solution, and be fair and consistent. Recognize that telework offers dual benefits to the agency and teleworker in those circumstances where you are able to provide employees the flexibility they need to meet their dependent care obligations while also being able to accomplish some work. Performance management and communication. It's important to build employee-supervisor relationships based on mutual respect. One way to achieve this goal is for managers to set clear goals and expectations for everyone, and to check in with employees on a regular basis. Managers should ensure lines of communication are open and that they treat all employees the same. For more information on managing a virtual workforce, please see the recordings of the trainings that we did in October and November on telework.gov, and I've also provided a link at the end of this presentation. Telework and dependent care policy. So here we're going to get into OPM's guidance that was issued in December. And the guidance was broken down in 5 key areas, which included home-based dependent care arrangements, telework as a temporary short-term flexibility, telework to address elder care, and telework following childbirth, adoption, or foster care, and then telework for nursing moms. The first section addresses home-based dependent care arrangements, and the most important takeaway in the guidance for home-based dependent care arrangements is that the presence of a dependent in the home is not an absolute bar to telework. The guidance also recognizes that home-based dependent care arrangements are a legitimate option used by employees to address dependent care needs. The guidance also clarifies that teleworkers are expected to have dependent care arrangements in place just as they would if they were working in the office. The guidance reinforces that employees should not engage in dependent care activities when performing official duties and requires teleworkers to notify their supervisors in the event that there is a significant disruption in the work and to take appropriate leave. Telework as a temporary short-term flexibility. In this section, OPM's guidance recognizes that there may be unplanned and temporary circumstances when telework can be an appropriate short-term workplace flexibility for employees with caregiving responsibilities. Examples may include an unplanned breakdown in existing dependent care arrangements, telework during an agency closure or unscheduled telework when schools are also closed, a school closure like a teacher's workday or a half day of school, etc. Again, the emphasis here is that telework is one of the tools available to agencies to assist employees with work and dependent care responsibilities. Managers continue to have the discretion to decide which workplace flexibility is the best solution for addressing the employee's dependent care issue, whether that be telework, leave, or flexible work schedules, or some combination of each of those. The guidance also establishes certain parameters that limit these unplanned or short-term circumstances to exceptions that do not represent the rule. It places the appropriate focus on the work while striking a balance with the employee's caregiving responsibilities. The guidance also recognizes the benefits to the agency when supervisors support employees' efforts to accomplish at least a portion of the scheduled work hours instead of taking leave for the entire day. It reinforces that employees should not engage in dependent care activities when performing official duties and requires teleworkers to notify their supervisors in the event that there is a significant disruption in the work, and they should then request appropriate leave. Telework in elder care. An increasing number of federal employees find themselves having to assume elder care responsibilities to care for aging parents and or adult dependents who may have a disability or serious health condition. Telework used in conjunction with other leave and workplace flexibilities can assist employees with these elder care responsibilities. Elder care arrangements that require increased levels of care may require more manager and employee communication to determine which flexibilities will best assist the employee balance work and dependent care responsibilities. The guidance also recognizes that in some instances, an employee may need to travel to a different geographic location in order to address an elder care situation. In all telework arrangements, including those involving a temporary relocation, a written telework agreement is required. Any changes in the arrangement, especially extensions, should trigger a reassessment by the agency to determine if the agency is willing to have the employee continue to perform work in a different geographic location. Agencies and managers need to understand that serving as a remote worker may affect an employee's official work site, pay, and other entitlements such as travel. Telework following childbirth, adoption, or foster care. Telework used in conjunction with other leave and workplace flexibilities can be useful to employees during the period following childbirth, adoption, or foster care. The guidance specifically addressed telework following childbirth because this is an area where we receive frequent questions from agencies, managers, and employees. As we know, telework is often used in conjunction with leave during the transition period between childbirth and the return to full-time official duties. It should be noted that telework can apply to the employee who is transitioning back to work following childbirth, or her spouse or family member who is a federal employee who is assisting with the care of the mother or baby. In some, telework flexibilities can apply to new mothers, fathers, same-sex couples, and relevant family members who are federal employees. Telework during the transition period must be approved by the employee's supervisor based on the agency telework policy and the ability of the employee to accomplish his or her work. Requests to telework related to an employee's recovery from childbirth or care for a family member recovering from childbirth and transitioning back to work should be accompanied by a formal written telework agreement that summarizes expectations. Additionally, the guidance places the appropriate focus on the work while striking a balance with the employee's caregiving responsibilities. It also recognizes the benefit to the agency when supervisors support employee efforts to accomplish at least a portion of the scheduled work hours during the transition period to full duty. It also reinforces that employees should not engage in dependent care activities when performing their official duties. Telework and nursing moms. The guidance highlights that telework can complement and augment an agency's existing workplace accommodation program for employees who are nursing mothers. It allows an employee who teleworks to use a reasonable amount of break time to express breast milk for a nursing child. It does not require agencies to compensate nursing mothers for breaks taken for the purpose of expressing milk. However, it does allow teleworkers to use compensated breaks for this purpose, just as they would if they were working in the office. In the section on telework and nursing moms, the guidance does not create any new employee entitlements or benefits. Additionally, the presence of a dependent in the home is not an absolute bar to teleworking. However, a teleworker in this instance is expected to have dependent care arrangements in place when performing official duties. In this section, we will address a few scenarios that highlight how telework can be used to assist employees balance their work and family responsibilities. I'd also like to introduce that Janessa Gant, my colleague, has actually joined, and she's been following the presentation up until this point. So when we get to the frequently asked questions section, she will be able to help with some of the questions that have actually come in from the audience up until that point. Home-based dependent care arrangements. So here we have Mason's son Malin was born several months ago. He and his wife have a nanny caring for Malin at home each day. Mason discussed with his supervisor the fact that he has a home office on the 3rd floor and the nanny cares for the baby on the 1st and 2nd floors. So his supervisor has approved Mason to telework on Tuesdays. As a sleep-deprived young parent, Mason appreciates the extra sleep he can get on Tuesdays when he is not commuting, and also enjoys the extra time he has to decompress after work and prepare a nice dinner for the family. As noted previously, OPM's guidance recognizes that home-based dependent care arrangements are a legitimate option used by federal employees to address their dependent care needs. Additionally, the guidance makes it clear that the presence of a dependent in the home is not an absolute bar to determining telework eligibility. Telework as a temporary short-term flexibility. Pamela has a 3-year-old daughter named Chloe, who is cared for by a licensed daycare provider in her neighborhood. Late in the night, she receives a call from her provider indicating she has a family emergency that requires her to go out of town on short notice. Pamela has an important report deadline to meet. She is able to get her mother to come over, but only for 4 hours. She asks her supervisor if she can be approved for 4 hours of annual leave and 4 hours of telework during the time her mother cares for her daughter. Her supervisor appreciates Pamela's efforts to accomplish at least a portion of her work instead of having to take leave for the entire work day. Pamela appreciates the flexibility because it allows her to meet her report deadline. In this scenario, we have an example of an unplanned and unforeseeable disruption in an established dependent care arrangement. The benefit for the agency is Pamela is able to meet an important report deadline. The benefit for Pamela is she is able to combine leave with telework to accomplish at least a portion of scheduled work hours while balancing her family and work responsibilities. Telework to address elder care. Marvin's dad has kidney disease requiring weekly dialysis treatment. He is often depressed and frightened about his condition. Dialysis treatments leave him weak and unable to make meals. Marvin's ability to combine telework with other leave options provide him with the flexibility he needs to help his father cope with his medical condition. His reduced commute time also allows him to take less leave on those days he needs to drive his father to dialysis. Again, this is an example of combining telework with other workplace flexibilities to help an employee meet his elder care responsibilities. Telework following childbirth. Keisha gave birth to her daughter Kendall 8 weeks ago. She contacted her supervisor to discuss her transition back to work following childbirth. Keisha and her husband arranged for his mother to move in with them to care for the baby during her transition to work and when she returns to the office full-time. Keisha and her supervisor discuss what projects will be completed during her transition and agree on a schedule of work. Keisha appreciates the flexibility to start working part-time before returning full-time duty in the office. In this scenario, a variety of workplace flexibilities, including telework, can be useful to employees during the transition period following childbirth. Telework in this example must be approved by the employee's supervisor based on the agency's telework policy and the ability of the employee to accomplish work. During the transition period, the employee may combine telework with other forms of leave and scheduling changes to help her balance work with dependent care responsibilities. Telework and nursing moms. Carrie is breastfeeding her 6-month-old son, Jacob. She expresses breast milk in the designated nursing room at her office during her morning break. Recently, she was approved to telework once a week. She is grateful to be able to continue her practice of expressing milk in the comfort and privacy of her own home. In this scenario, the guidance makes it clear that an employee who teleworks has the same opportunity to express breast milk during a designated break period as an employee who is working in the office. So for this section, I'm going to look at a few frequently asked questions. We do cover additional frequently asked questions in the guidance, and that guidance is currently available on telework.gov. Again, Janessa Gant has joined me, and she's been following the presentation up until this point, so she has also come up with a few questions that I will field right after the next two frequently asked questions. The first is, what should a manager do if an in-home dependent care arrangement or telework arrangement involving caregiving responsibilities negatively impacts an employee's performance or the performance of the work group? And the answer is, in cases where the teleworker's in-home dependent care arrangement is having a negative impact on the employee's performance or the performance of the work group, the manager may review the telework agreement with the employee and give the employee a chance to improve. The telework agreement should also include a clause that makes it clear that either the manager or the teleworker may cancel the telework agreement when it negatively impacts the employee's performance or the performance of the group. Next question. When should a manager terminate a telework agreement? A manager should terminate a telework agreement when there is a performance or conduct issue. The manager or supervisor should be able to demonstrate that the employee's teleworking directly or negatively impacts the employee's individual performance and or the performance of the work group or organization, and that continuation of telework will interfere with remediation of the standards, such as the employee's ability to attain or return to fully successful performance, or to reverse a diminishment in performance. In some agencies, telework agreements indicate employees must be at a fully successful level or higher in order to telework. So, before I go to the key takeaways, I'm going to take a few questions from Janessa, who has been gathering questions from the audience. So go right ahead.
Thank you, Veronica. Our first question: I have an employee who has requested to telework for 6 months in order to continue breastfeeding her new baby. Is that allowed under the new guidance?
That's an interesting question, and that is actually a question that comes up frequently. I will say this: the current guidance is not intended to address that particular situation. While we certainly understand that telework can be a useful, flexible work arrangement that complements and augments an agency's existing workplace accommodation program for employees who are nursing mothers, the intention of the guidance is not to replace those existing programs. As we indicated before, this guidance does not create any new entitlements or benefits for employees. And I think it's also important to point out that an employee who is permitted to telework, who also nurses, is expected to have dependent care arrangements in place on the days that the employee is teleworking.
Okay. The next question: could an employee modify their existing telework agreement to telework full-time during the summer while their children are off from school? This request will be short-term and temporary, so is that allowable?
I have to say that is, again, another question that comes up frequently. Again, not envisioned in this particular guidance. While the purpose of OPM's guidance is certainly to clarify the appropriate role that telework can play in balancing work and dependent care responsibilities, it does not change the basic premise that employees may not telework or use telework as a substitute for dependent care. It sounds like in this particular request that the employee's request to change the telework schedule is made for the purpose of meeting the dependent care responsibilities. Again, when you're talking about a summer break, this is neither an unplanned nor an unexpected event. Under the existing guidance, employees are expected to arrange for dependent care just as they would if they were working in the office.
Okay. The next one: so I have an employee whose father was just released from a nursing home and will be moving in with the family. They'll have an in-home nurse who will stop by every day, but sometimes the employee might have to help provide additional care. The employee has requested to telework full-time during his father's recovery period. Is that okay?
I would say yes to that. Under an agency's telework policy, an employee may be permitted to telework in order to meet the needs of a family member with a serious health condition. Frequently in those situations, the employee will use telework along with other workplace flexibilities, including perhaps leave, changes in their work schedule in order to accommodate their elder care responsibilities. It is important to remember that an employee may not care for the family member while engaged in their performance of their official duties. This includes with an adult dependent. Again, we would encourage agencies when looking at those situations to, again, communicate with the employee to have a full understanding of exactly what kind of support they need, to look at existing programs. If the employee is allowed to telework, again, they should have a written telework agreement in place.
Okay. And then here's our last question. Could an employee telework a couple additional days in preparation for the end of the school year and the beginning of a summer camp program? Say, for instance, school ends on Wednesday, but the summer program does not begin until the following Monday. Could they use telework to bridge the gap?
That is, again, a question that comes up frequently. It could be a situation where there's, in this case, it's a summer school 2-day gap between the end of school and the beginning of the summer school program. We frequently also get questions from employees who ask about, what happens if there's a teacher's work day or perhaps there's a half day of school. Is telework an appropriate tool to address that concern? And the truth of the matter is, as I indicated before, telework can be a tool that can assist an employee in that situation. A manager should certainly look at all of the options available. In this case, a manager may decide that telework is appropriate. Another manager may decide that the employee should take annual leave, and in other situations, they may basically say you could use telework for those hours in which the employee is actually working, and then take leave for periods of time when perhaps the employee is taking care of their dependent care responsibilities. So again, the purpose of this guidance is to provide agencies with tools looking at a whole assortment of workplace flexibilities that might be available, and then to communicate with employees to make a decision about what tools would best be useful to help them balance their work and dependent care responsibilities.
Okay, thank you.
So is that it?
Yep, that's
Okay.
all we have.
Well, again, if that's all, thank you all. In the interest of time, we're getting close to the end of this webcast. I will say that if for whatever reason we were unable to get to any questions that you might have regarding the guidance, certainly feel free to send an email to us at teleworkquestion@opm.gov. I will end the webcast with a few key takeaways to keep in mind. The first is that telework, along with other workplace flexibilities, can be useful in helping employees balance their work and dependent care responsibilities. We also want to emphasize that agencies and organizations that support employees with dependent care situations can experience positive outcomes in the areas of recruitment and retention, increased job performance, reduced usage of leave, increased morale. So it's not just one-sided. There are some benefits to your agency and your organization. I also want to make clear that while the guidance clarifies, it does not eliminate the requirement that employees may not use telework as a substitute for dependent care. Finally, an important point is that the guidance makes it clear that the presence of a dependent in the home is not an absolute bar to determining telework eligibility, and the purpose of the guidance is to place the appropriate focus on the work while striking a balance with the employee's caregiving responsibilities. Again, I hope that you benefited from the information that was shared in this webcast today. Again, if you have any questions, if there was anything that we didn't cover in the webcast, certainly feel free to reach out to us at teleworkquestion@opm.gov, and thank you again for your participation.